guys remember during the last years or COVID, the sex scenes on TV discourse was everywhere. I mean, this topic does predate COVID, but it was especially intense around that time. People seem to be growing tired of the increasing number of unnecessary sex scenes on TV shows. Weirdly enough, the appetite for spicy book seemed to skyrocket, in part because of, communities like BookTok. And yeah, it was lockdown. People wanted some spiciness, I guess. Anyway, well, not to beat a dead horse or anything, but I've been thinking about that recently because I've been annoyed. I just started watching the show called Ginny and Georgia, and for years I thought that this was a coming-of-age show about two best friends. It's actually mother and daughter. Anyway, there's this one scene, well, it's one of many actually, but in this scene in particular, Ginny, the girl, and her boyfriend Marcus are in bed, and there's a lot of heavy petting. Normal for teenagers, right? Well, in this scene, Marcus, his hand is downstairs, moving vigorously while Ginny rides around on the bed. Ginny's character is meant to be 15, and she kind of looks it. Needless to say, this was really uncomfortable, and my first thoughts were, who wrote this? And secondly, who was this for? Obviously not me. More weird is that on the show, the adult intimate scenes are kind of fade to black, so I don't know why we have to have such extended, detailed scenes for Ginny. It's also kind of funny that this is the show where I was like, okay, no, this is enough now, because I watch a ton of these kinds of shows and I don't really get the urge to write about them, even though it can be vaguely annoying. Shows that are provocative, sometimes to the point of absurdity, like Elite and Euphoria. Speaking of Elite, it does feel like that show did influence this era of more graphic and gratuitous scenes in these highly stylized teen shows. I mean, we've had edgy shows before, like Skins, but for a long time in between, the CW type of shows were huge. You see, they'd cornered the market on romantasy post-Twilight and just, young adult drama and romances. So when Elite came around, and later Euphoria, it felt as though they were pushing the boundaries in their depictions of not just sex, but violence, trauma, abuse, and substance use. Now, I did actually watch all seasons of those shows, and, I enjoyed them for the most part, but the way they were filmed, often dreamlike, cinematic, kind of made me feel a bit, removed or distant from the show. It's the music and the lighting. It all felt kind of like fantasy, and even though we're often witnessing some quite traumatic events play out on screen, none of it really felt real. A show like Ginny and Georgia, while it's not as gritty and natural as, say, Skins back in the day, I feel like it falls somewhere in the middle of these highly stylized, provocative shows and hyper-realism style. So we're getting a front row seat to the awkwardness of teen intimacy, which is normal on a coming-of-age show. But the way that these scenes on the show are filmed, it's incredibly jarring, and they go on for way too long for a character that looks so young. I was thinking about the time that Ruth Wilson came out and she said that she felt a little bit exploited on the show The Affair because they were asking her to do so much nudity and too many sex scenes, even when it felt unnecessary for her. I mean, this is Ruth Wilson saying that, and she's not the first actress to come out and say this. And so I often wonder how these young actors must feel. And I know that intimacy coordinators are there to keep them safe, and that's their job, but still, like, the end product, what I'm seeing on the show especially, is still kind of feels weird and uncomfortable, And also, the teens on the show, like, just the way that they talk about sex and just anything sexual in general is quite vulgar. And this isn't new for teen shows. I mean, we've had Sex Education, which also had that sometimes vulgar sexual humor, but the dialogue on that show is actually really sharp and funny, at least in the first 2 seasons or so. But to be fair, I still do think that it's a good thing that there's openness around teen sexuality, and there are some taboo topics that are tackled on the show that probably do make some young people feel less alone and like they can relate. So the way I feel about the show is similar to how I felt about 13 Reasons Why, which is why I stopped watching that show after that bathtub scene where the girls took her own life. These things happen, but do we really need to be in the room and get an HD look at every single angle and moment of it? I would argue no. And also, sure, you can just say, well, don't watch. But I still find the conversation around the changing landscape of what is acceptable on mainstream TV, especially on teen shows, really interesting. It's just interesting to talk about. There are some, teen or young adult shows that do handle this well. I think that Normal People is a great example. That show is a masterpiece, by the way. There are a lot of intimate scenes on there, but they somehow don't feel as invasive. And one of the reasons is probably the pacing. For example, before Marianne and Connell have sex for the first time, there's quite a bit of build-up. They've planned this, they talk about it prior, and he makes sure that he has her consent and she knows that they can stop at any time. This already puts you at ease as the viewer, and it's also how those scenes are filmed. They're gentle, and somehow you're more focused on the evolving emotional bond between Marianne and Connell. It's not really the discomfort of Marianne losing her virginity at the forefront, so it feels less confronting. It also helps that the actors who play Connell and Marianne look a little bit older. And I get it. Ginny and Georgia is a completely different show, and it does have a really realistic depiction of someone's first time with a guy who doesn't really know or care about her yet. And Ginny is pretending that she's done this before, so it's supposed to be uncomfortable. But I was a bit more put off by the fact that the camera was just there lingering way too long, and it was weird. Even later on in the show, when Ginny does feel ready and comfortable to initial oral sex, it just starts out very abruptly. And, close camera angles, the silence, Marcus's discomfort. Yeah, it all feels like too much. Ginny and Georgia isn't the worst culprit by any means either. I really hated the overuse of sex scenes on Bridgerton, season 1 especially. I loved the books and I had no issue with, the spiciness on there. But on the show, somehow they felt a bit tonally out of place and kind of explicit as well. And I get that Regency romances are meant to be spicy and sensual, but it's just so jarring on the show because of this fairy tale aesthetic of Bridgerton. And yeah, it just made the sex scenes feel a bit out of place. Anyway, let me stop now before I go on to another bunch of shows that I do have issues with. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I am probably going to finish Ginny and Georgia because, I have my issues with it. I need to have Joe finally find love. Oh my God, that man. Also, my cousin watches it and I'm usually around when it's on, so yeah. Have any of you guys seen this show and do you feel the same way, or are there any other shows that make you feel this way? I'd be keen to hear your thoughts, and thank you for watching.